El derecho es una ficción, ¿sabes? Un invento de los poderosos para que los pies descalzos no manchen sus alfombras.
This is the story of José Raimundo Russi, the lawyer who turned into a criminal and murderer, and ended up facing a firing squad.
La ciudad crece, pero las calles están sucias.
Y los impuestos suben. La policía apenas puede con el orden.
Hay que hablar con el alcalde, la gente se queja.
The streets of La Candelaria. Towards the year 1850, Santafe de Bogota was not a city. It was an immutable hierarchy written on the fabric of clothing. On the one hand, the cachacos in frock coats and colonial cradles. On the other, the men in ruana and espadrilles. And in the midst of this social fracture operated a man who inhabited both worlds, Dr. José Raimundo Russi, a lawyer of brilliant intellect, educated in the heart of jurisprudence, but systematically rejected by the Bogota elite due to his plains origin. Santafe de Bogota was not ready for him. Barely in his 20s and with a law degree freshly etched into his skin, the young José Raimundo Russi burst into the courts with an eloquence that combined brilliance and danger. The official history of Cordovez Moure records him as an enlightened and intelligent individual, called to perform the very delicate position of prosecutor of the period. But behind the prosecutor's frock coat and his role as secretary of the society, an incurable resentment lay. He had conquered the law, yes, but the Bogota aristocracy would never forgive him for the mud on his plain boots. The origin of the wolf. Narrator V.O. Nuncia Casanare, an untamed corner of the eastern plains where on January 1st, 1827, José Raimundo Russi opened his eyes. His birth did not know luxuries. He was born into a mestizo and humble family in a country that had just been born and that already bore the deep scars of colonial castes.
No es justo. Trabajamos tanto y siempre hay más que hacer.
Lo sé, mi amor, pero mira a nuestro alrededor. Esta tierra es nuestra, eso es lo que importa.
Russi was not an heir to lands or rancid surnames, his only inheritance. It was an unusual intelligence, a double-edged sword that allowed him to force his way among the academic elites of the cold and impenetrable Santa Fe of Bogota.
El mundo está cambiando. Lo siento en el aire. Pronto, estas llanuras no serán las mismas.
Buenos días, maestro. Joven Ruiz, ¿aún con los libros? Mucho esfuerzo. Sí, para abrirme camino en esta sociedad. Adelante, Ruiz. Es respetado aquí. Esos mestizos no pertenecen a nuestros círculos.
While his fellow students slapped reality with empty speeches, Russi observed the contempt with which the ruling class looked at the barefoot. During his sleepless nights, his way of thinking became radicalized. He began to see the bourgeoisie not as a man, example to follow, but as a social parasite, and to the class of the poor as an army of artisans waiting for a leader. At only 24 years old, he was already wearing the lawyer's frock coat, but his soul continued to wear the ruana. He was ready to use the law or destroy it.
Los libros que cruzan el océano desde Francia no hablan de coronas ni de herencias de sangre. Hablan de igualdad.
To expand the first 15 years of José Raimundo Russi's life, 1827 to 1842, with historical rigor, we must immerse ourselves in the reality of the Llanos Orientales and the province of Tunja just after independence. Russi's childhood was not only humble, it was marked by violence, geographical isolation, and a caste system that, although legally abolished, continued to prevail in practice.
Cuidado con el barro, hijo.
Sí, voy con cuidado.
The Mirror of the Mind. Russi's crack. Santafe de Bogota, 1850. A city of barely 30,000 inhabitants where everyone knows each other, judges each other, and watches each other. In his office, by the flickering light of a candle, the young lawyer José Raimundo Russi does not read criminal codes. Study something more complex, darker, and malleable: human psychology. Russi has discovered an uncomfortable truth in this corner of the world. He knows that the written law is rigid, but the minds of men are soft. His ego, fueled by superior intelligence and impeccable classical rhetoric, whispers a dangerous idea to him. Why wear yourself out defending the laws of a weak state when you can govern the weaknesses of the men who created them? Why did a brilliant young man decide to study law in Bogota in 1850? For José Raimundo Russi, the penal codes were not a call to justice. They were the only key to force the doors of a hermetic and classist society. A Santafe de Bogota where the last name was worth more than the intellect. But in the classrooms, Russi discovered a bitter truth. The law was not designed to make men equal, but to protect the privileges of the gaminal elite. His modest origins were a useless glass wall against which his brilliance collided. There the engine of his transformation was born, a deep and silent class resentment. The Prometheus complex and the double life. It is here that what modern psychology calls the Prometheus complex is activated in your psyche. Russi feels like a titan trapped among mediocre mortals. If the Bogota aristocracy monopolizes power and wealth like capricious gods, he will be in charge of stealing that fire from them. It is a historical fact. Russi defended the artisans and the dispossessed of Bogota without charging them a single cent. For the people, he was a kind hero. In his mind, it was the perfect smokescreen. His intellectual superiority operated as the great justification. Considering himself infinitely more intelligent than the judges and prosecutors around him, he came to the conclusion that ordinary laws did not apply to him. He was above. And now, a special message to our viewers. We deeply appreciate your utmost attention. Thank you for embarking on this historical journey with us.
Dear viewer, bringing these stories and videos to life requires a great deal of effort and dedication. If you enjoy our work, please consider subscribing to the channel, sharing this video, and leaving a comment. Your support means everything to us. Thank you.
The double life of a functional psychopath. The metamorphosis gives way to a functional psychopathy executed with surgical coldness. Russi possesses a magnetic superficial charm and an astonishing ability to compartmentalize his existence in two parallel universes that never intersect before the eyes of the public. By day, he wears the impeccable frock coat of the respectable jurist, walks with a firm step towards the courts, and delights the audiences with classical and Roman references. But when night falls on the roofs of tile of La Candelaria, he sheds his mask. In the shadows, he becomes the absolute puppet master of the Molino del Cubo criminal gang. Russi does not dirty his hands with crude violence. He provides the psychological architecture of the crime. He manipulates the shortcomings and ambition of tough men like Ignacio Rodriguez, converting his brute force into the executing arm of millimetric plans. Under the planks of his own house, they begin to design the underground tunnels and write the secret diary that details his crimes. There is no trace of guilt or remorse in his eyes. Every blow, every loot taken from Bogota's opulence is for Russi an act of forced redistribution and intellectual revenge against the society that dared to look down on him. The Shadow Alliance. The judicial archives of 1851 keep the trace of the pact that shook Santa Fe. José Raimundo Russi and Ignacio Rodriguez, whom the voices on the street simply called González, crossed paths in the worst possible place, the smoky taverns of the lower slums, where artisans conspired against the elite. Russi, with his impeccable frock coat and his enlightened rhetoric, desperately sought the executing arm for his revenge fantasies. Social. Rodriguez, a man of action, rough and hardened in danger, was looking for a mind to guide him.
Bebe algo, Ignacio. O González, si es que prefieres el alias que usas con la guardia. Veo en tus ojos el mismo fuego que me trajo este sumidero. Estás cansado de huir de los alcaldes de barrio, ¿verdad?
The psychological connection was immediate and lethal. Class resentment united them. Russi saw in him the malleable brute force, the perfect piece for his chessboard. González saw in the young lawyer a protective god, capable of bending the laws in his favor.
Quiero tu audacia, tu fuerza. La policía de Góngora te busca por saltar tapías y asaltar caminos, pero robas migajas.
Master of crime, a network of underground tunnels that would connect the jurist's house with the sinister Molino del Cubo. The most dangerous secret society in Bogota had been born, an alliance of shadows where the mind of the lawyer and the audacity of the scoundrel sealed, without knowing it, their direct passage to the scaffold.
Mira bien el mapa. El subsuelo es nuestro único espacio libre de sospechas. Pues yo oír mis pies en la carrera.
Russi, escucha, hay que excavar túneles para esconder el botín robado a la burguesía.
The blindness of the ego. Russi has calculated everything except the limitations of his own ego. Blinded by his narrative of invulnerability, convinced that his dominance over the human psyche makes him untouchable, he makes the classic Promethean mistake, underestimating the power of the gods he has decided to challenge. He is not able to foresee that the same closed society that he despises so much, when it feels under attack, will not judge him as an ordinary criminal. They will pursue him with the fury of a wounded caste. In the shadows of Bogota, the machinery of the state has already begun to move, and a prosecutor of the same age, Francisco Eustaquio Alvarez, is preparing to fight a duel to the death, where class resentment will come face to face with the implacable rigor of the law. Russi's crack has widened, and the path to the scaffold in the Plaza de Bolívar no longer has any turning back. The ego above the law. At this point in his story, Russi's psychological ideology fractures. He no longer sees law as a path of justice, but as a chessboard where ordinary people are just pieces. His ego prevents him from being another cog in the judicial system. He wants to be the puppet master. He decides that the path of the law is too narrow for his ambition. By understanding how criminals think, how the rich fear, and how artisans become disillusioned, like Francisco Londoño, who would later sit on his jury, Russi finds the other side of the coin. If psychology allows you to anticipate human behavior, you will use it to cross the line. Not to clumsily break the law, but to circumvent it with surgical precision. The robberies before El Herrerito. Based on the chronicles of the time, mainly the reminiscences of Santa Fe and Bogota by José María Cordovez Mure, and on the judicial files of the notorious trial of 1851, the criminal society led by the lawyer José Raimundo Russi and his right-hand man Juan González, known as One-Eyed González, systematically carried out a series of assaults before the fateful encounter with the locksmith and blacksmith Manuel Ferro, whom the sources recorded historically as Manuel Ferro, or sometimes mentioned contextually in chronicles as his Herrerito. Historians and records of the time formally attribute to the Russi Company a total of 4 major robberies and high-impact assaults in the capital, before merchant Juan Alsina's greed for loot unleashed internal betrayal. The previous documented coups were 1. The assault on the convent of San Agustin, the initial large-scale coup where the gang stole valuable religious objects, cups and silver and gold relics. 2. The looting of the house of Mrs. Maria de Jesus del Castillo, a violent residential assault against one of the city's leading families, in which jewelry and cash were taken. 3. The robbery of the house of a wealthy citizen with the last name Bruno, where they applied prior espionage tactics to know the movement of the property. 4. The robbery at the residence of Don Andres Caicedo, remembered in the chronicles for the cruelty of the gang, since to neutralize the victim and prevent him from recognizing them, they threw quicklime in his eyes. The Diary of Infamy, how Russi's log became his own death sentence. History and the judicial records of 1851 confirm with absolute certainty this fascinating and fatal detail. José Raimundo Russi kept a diary and a handwritten notebook where he meticulously recorded the activities of the gang, and this document became the queen evidence that led him to the scaffold. The chroniclers of the time, such as José María Cordovez Mor, the press of the era, and the trial files explain this event in detail. The purpose. Russi did not see himself as a common criminal, but as a social reformer and a strategic brain. With a legal, methodical, and almost obsessive mentality, he considered that the bucket mill gang should operate under a strict order. In the notebook that the police found in his house, Russi had written in his own handwriting the regulations of the organization, a kind of constitution or statutes for the members of the band, where the duties were defined, the punishments for betrayal, which sealed the fate of the blacksmith Manuel Ferro, and the oath of loyalty. The inventory of the thefts, a detailed list of the objects stolen from the mansions of the Bogota elite, gold chalices, silver cutlery, jewelry, cash. The distribution of the loot, almost mathematical formulas of how the loot should be distributed among the material executors such as Rodriguez, González, Castillo and Alarcón, and the part that corresponded to him as the organizing brain and legal protector. For Russi, this newspaper had a double purpose: to control that his accomplices did not deceive him with the stolen wealth, and to give an almost corporate or political structure to his wealth redistribution crusade. Ironically, the most lethal weapon against the infamous Dr. Russi did not come from the police rifles, but from his own handwriting, the curse of his diary. Obsessed with order and finance, Russi did not record crimes, but the balance sheets of a criminal enterprise he called his company. He noted every jewel, every ounce of gold, and every coup with the precision of an accountant. What he believed was the monument to his genius ended up being his own ticket to the scaffold, the ultimate proof that the authorities would use to dismantle his network. Confident in the perfect accounting of his impunity, Russi decided that the company should make its most ambitious coup, the Spanish Juan Alsina's fine merchandise warehouse. But the imposing iron locks of that place required something that the lawyer's cunning could not buy: the technical skill of a specialist. This is how, driven by the ambition to open those heavy padlocks, and convinced that this would be just one more success in their log of robberies, Russi and the one-eyed González made the mistake that would seal their fate: contact the blacksmith Manuel Ferro. Little did they suspect that the gang's diary was about to be closed with blood, and that the humble craftsman would not accept being a poorly paid laborer, unleashing the betrayal that would lead them directly to execution. The baptism of blood and gold. Official history and the judicial files of 1851 precisely point to the heist that gave rise to both the myth and the tragedy of the Molino del Cubo gang. It happened early that year, when José Raimundo Russi and his reckless right-hand man, Ignacio Rodriguez, executed their first major assault of historical significance: the audacious robbery at the shop of a distrustful merchant of Catalan origin settled in Bogota, Don Juan Alsina. For this baptism of fire, the main crew was made up of Rodriguez's trusted men: Nicolás Castillo, Vicente Alarcón, and Gregorio Carranza. At that precise moment of greed and plunder, the blacksmith Manuel Ferro was not yet part of the gang. His recruitment came later. Due to his trade and unmatched technical skill with metals, the gang contacted him afterward for a strategic purpose. They needed an artisan capable of forging master keys and precision tools to violate the impenetrable locks of the grand mansions belonging to Santa Fe's elite. A pact forged with Pharaoh's iron that, very soon, would be paid for with his own blood. The assault on Alcina's shop was carried out under the cover of one of those stormy, thick-fogged nights that usually paralyzed the capital. While Russi kept watch from the shadows of a stone archway, Rodriguez and his men scaled the rear walls of the establishment. Armed with iron bars and brute force, they silently forced an interior entry, managing to steal a heavy chest filled with gold and silver coins alongside fine imported goods, before vanishing into the labyrinth of muddy alleyways of La Candelaria. At dawn, the official report and the press chronicles of the era, spread with alarm in newspapers like El Neogranadino, described the event not as a simple theft, but as a direct affront to the security of commerce and the respectability of foreigners in New Granada. The press reported with indignation the audacity of an organized crew that seemed to mock the patrols of Góngора's police, sowing a silent panic among Santa Fe's wealthiest families, who suddenly discovered that the high walls of their mansions were no longer enough to keep out the demons of the night.
¿Oyeron del robo en la tienda del comerciante español? Dicen que fue anoche.
¡Qué escándalo! ¿Se llevaron mucho y la policía? Nada aún. Sospechan de alguien de adentro.
Habrá consecuencias graves. Ahí sí el comercio.
Esto es terrible para todos.
La inseguridad está arruinando el nuestro Bogotá. La inseguridad en el patria de Bogotá.
Alcina's store. In the Santa Fe de Bogota of 1851, great wealth was not hidden behind modern brands or fancy names. The court records and the chronicles of Cordovez Moor reveal that the first major objective of the gang was baptized verbatim in the press of the time as Juan Alcina's clothing store. But don't let the term fool you. In those days, a store was not a modest neighborhood business, but an imposing warehouse of fine merchandise, filled with luxurious fabrics and products imported directly from Europe. It was the heart of the trade of a respected citizen of Catalan origin, a temple of colonial abundance that guarded heavy chests loaded with gold and silver inside. A resplendent loot that fatally ended up attracting the calculating gaze of Dr. Russi and the steel of his night gang.
The plan is flawless, Manolito. Your skill is the key.
The risk is too great, Doctor.
Nació en el santo Exeomo con la mente de un titán, un abogado mestizo buscando su propio pan. Bogotá de 1850, una aldea de altivez, donde el apellido pesa más que la honradez. chocó contra la pared, contra el cristal social, y el resentimiento de clase se volvió su pedestal. Estudió las leyes sabiendo su falsedad, armadura de los ricos, trampa de la verdad. Su ego le susurró: tú eres superior, róbales el fuego sagrado y conviértete en señor. Ay, doctor Russi, titán de la Candelaria, la túnica blanca te espera en la plaza diaria. Robaste el fuego a los dioses con frío intelecto, pero el plomo de la ley borrará tu plan perfecto. No le cobraba a los pobres, fingía ser un santo, mientras bajo sus tablones tejía el desencanto. Túneles ocultos bajo el molino del cubo, la mente psicópata que Santa Fe tuvo. De día vestía levita, retórica de Roma, de noche manejaba el pillo que la vida toma. Estudió las leyes sabiendo su falsedad, armadura de los ricos, trampa de la verdad. Su ego le susurró: tú eres superior, róbales el fuego sagrado y conviértete en señor. Ay, doctor Russi, titán de la Candelaria, la túnica blanca te espera en la plaza diaria. Robaste el fuego a los dioses con frío intelecto, pero el plomo de la ley borrará tu plan perfecto. 1851 llegó la traición. 20,000 pesos robados causaron la división. Manuelito Ferro, el herrero, exigió su tajada, y en la carrera segunda se fragó la puñalada. 5 golpes de acero a las 7:30 de la noche. El titiritero elimina su pieza sin reproche, pero el diario secreto en su cama escondido selló el destino del genio que ya estaba hundido. Ay, doctor Russi, titán de la Candelaria, la túnica blanca ya gotea en la plaza diaria. A las 11:15 el capitán Aranza dio la señal. 18 balazos cobraron tu deuda mortal. Fuego graneado en el alma, tambores de la ejecución. Muere el hombre de 24 años, nace la confusión. Un secreto de confesión que nadie revelará, y el fantasma de Russi por las calles vagará.
Dear viewer, bringing these stories and videos to life requires a great deal of effort and dedication.
If you enjoy our work,
please consider subscribing to the channel, sharing this video, and leaving a comment. Your support means everything to us. Thank you.